what we call a high road fellows. They apply for a position mostly from the ILR school at Cornell, and they come to Buffalo and they do work with community engaged learning with social justice organizations around Buffalo, and they add so much to our community. The work they do is really invaluable, and I want to thank them for coming to Buffalo and for the work they do, which includes work such as lead poisoning children. Just the brief time that she has been in Buffalo, and I want to quote her, it's Finley Williams, right here. Finley wrote, "I think that our discussions of the East Side and Buffalo as a whole, that in our discussions of the East Side and Buffalo as a whole, my peers and I must keep the possible in mind. In fact, I believe the work we're doing here in Buffalo is an ode to the possible." I just want that to sink in a little bit, an ode to the possible. And that really optimistic note leads me to introduce why we're all here, which is to hear from Dr. Henry Lewis Taylor Jr. Thank you so much for being here. This talk is sponsored each year, as Lenore said, between the TR site and Cornell. And we generally bring in the Cornell University professor to speak at this event, but this year, your work, we just felt was so critical for you to come and speak to our community and us in light of your extensive work working in Buffalo and the Black community, and the obvious need that we have to learn from you and to do better. And it's also appropriate that Cornell is sponsoring this event because it was a Cornellian who motivated and guided Dr. Taylor in his life's work. Dr. Taylor's father received his PhD from Cornell University in 1954. And Dr. Taylor's father always challenged him to use his skills and talents in service of Black people and to help build a better, more just and humane world. And that's what Dr. Taylor has been doing for the last 4 decades. And we're so grateful that and fortunate that most of your impressive body of work has occurred right here in the Buffalo Niagara region. Dr. Taylor's work focuses on the connection between activism and scholarship to bring about social change. That's exactly what we're trying to teach these students here this summer. So it's really incredible, this connection. While you have an enormous body of work, Dr. Taylor, we're going to focus tonight on his seminal study of Black Buffalo, which took place over 30 years ago and was followed up in a report published at the end of 2021 entitled "The Harder We Run: The State of Black Buffalo from 1990 to Present." We're really humbled that you've accepted this opportunity to speak to us, and that through your work we can learn from our errors. I'm using your words here. We can learn from our errors, miscalculation, and flaws in thinking to improve the problem facing the Black community. We all here hunger to do something. And what I love about your work, Dr. Taylor, is that you offer easily understandable recommendations that we can all get behind. And so I'm really anxiously looking forward to hearing from you tonight, Dr. Taylor. For our online audience, so testing on the for online audience.
nice comment about my dad, who was Cornell graduate, very important in 1954. The moment that changed American history for the better. And someone that was always following me, come up to me and say, son, what victories will you win for humanity? I said, Dad, what you talking about? I'm fine. I don't even know what humanity is, man. What's wrong with you? But he figured eventually that I figured it out, and I'll always thank him for that. So I want to thank you for inviting me to share with you my reflections on the Harder We Run was more than a report to determine if Black Buffalo had made progress over the past 30 years. It also sought to determine how the city building process affected Blacks, community growth, and socioeconomic development. And moreover, the report intended to find out if 27 years of rule under 2 liberal Democratic mayors made a difference in Black life. The Harder We Run shows that Black Buffalo has not progressed over the past 3 decades. For example, the average household income, home ownership, and poverty rates are unchanged, while the unemployment rate remains in double digits. Only 31% of Blacks 16 years of age and older hold full-time, year-round jobs. And these workers are trapped in the low-wage sector of the labor market. Lastly, an indeterminate number of workers discouraged dropped out of the labor force altogether. Educational attainment was also a factor. The percentage of Blacks completing high school increased significantly, and there was a big jump in the number of African Americans going to college and graduating, but they still lag considerably behind their white counterparts. Meanwhile, Blacks 25 years of age and older, over 30% of them had some college, but no degree. A significant number of people were getting into higher education, but not getting out. They were not graduating. These advancements notwithstanding, after 30 years, there were still more Blacks without a high school diploma than a college degree. At the same time, during this 30-year period, the Black middle class continued to grow, although at a much slower rate. And that Black middle class went on to acquire considerable political power. However, they were not able to use this political power to transform or change the conditions affecting the Black mass. So consequently, in 2021, as in 1990, Blacks lived on the economic edge. Everything changed, but everything remained the same. The harder they ran, the farther they fell behind. Well, almost a year has passed since the release of The Harder We Run in September 2021. In tonight's presentation, I'll offer a reflective analysis of Black Buffalo. The presentation will be in 3 parts. The first part analyzes the racist forces thwarting the advancement of Black Buffalo over the last 30 years. The second part recommends a series of projects that could bring about the East Side's radical transformation. While in the final sector, I comment briefly on the impact of Buffalo's racist city building process on Blacks and the role of mayoral leadership in facilitating radical change on the East Side. Understanding why Black Buffalo has not progressed over the past 30 years starts with unpacking racial residential segregation. Buffalo is the sixth most segregated city in the United States. But it was not always that way. Before World War II, Blacks and white immigrants shared residential space on the Lower East Side. Blacks and white immigrants, they not only lived in the same neighborhoods, but sometimes they even lived in the same boarding houses. This is on Jefferson Street. The historian Lillian Williams tells us that some Blacks down on the East Side, they even learned how to speak German so they could hang out and party with the Germans. However, all that changed following World War II. What happened? What went wrong? The rise of mass home ownership produced a modern system of racial residential segregation. The reason is that creating mass home ownership as a tool of wealth production required developing a housing and residential land valuation system to guide the decision of mortgage brokers. That task failed to Frederick M. Babcock in 1930s. Babcock used whiteness and social class exclusivity to determine the value of housing and residential lands. He theorized that neighborhoods had life cycles. They were born, they grew, they declined, and eventually turned into slums, which in his world meant death. Babcock theorized that the mere presence of Blacks in these neighborhoods triggered their rapid decline and eventual transformation into a slum. Now, Babcock also said that white immigrants had a negative effect on neighborhood development, but it was not as harmful as that of Blacks. So, in Babcock's housing and residential land valorization system, it had a race and a class component. In this system, as the percentage of whites and social class exclusivity increased, so did housing values. Likewise, on the flip side, as housing values declined as the percentage of Blacks and social class inclusivity increased in a community. In this city building approach, whites occupied the most desirable and expensive residential lands, while Blacks lived on the most undesirable and cheapest residential lands. Moreover, in this approach, housing value became the hub around which neighborhood development was catalyzed. Consequently, white communities had the best parks, playgrounds, amenities, schools, institutions, stores, employment centers, and access to goods and services. These developed neighborhoods, in turn, gave whites a competitive edge in every aspect of American life and culture. Thus, in this system of American apartheid, the tethering of race, profits, and wealth to neighborhood development spawned the modern system of racial residential segregation,
and gave whites a possessive investment in it. Locally, after World War II, when mass homeownership took root, thousands of whites in Buffalo City migrated to Erie County's suburban home ownership zone, while blacks moved into the central city. By 2017, according to the Brookings Institute, Buffalo was now the 6th most segregated city in the United States. The overrepresentation of whites in the suburbs produced this pattern of residential segregation. For example, by 2020, only 17% of Erie County whites lived in Buffalo City compared to 76% of African Americans. If you look carefully at this chart, you will see Babcock's theory operationalized here in Erie County. So that as these communities became increasingly white and social class exclusivity became a factor of life, values went up as they became increasingly black, and inclusive values went down. So Clarence, which has less than 5% of white blacks, is at the top of the list. And Buffalo, with some 37% of African Americans, is at the bottom of the list. The tethering of race, profits, wealth production creates neighborhood segregation. So blacks resided mainly on the east side, on the cheapest and most undesirable land in Erie County. Within this context, a high rent wall confined blacks to the east side or central city neighborhoods where the conditions were similar. Simply put, blacks were stuck in space. Racial residential segregation was not benign. It trapped blacks in these marginalized, underdeveloped neighborhoods. And this entrapment turned the east side into a site of predatory investment and activities designed to extract wealth, retard development, increase dependency, and disempower the people. In this context, these underdeveloped east side neighborhoods became factories that produced workers who were willing to accept low-paid jobs with limited benefits and no possibility of advancement. This process of systemic neighborhood underdevelopment produced a series of root problems that drive the intergenerational oppression and exploitation of Black Buffalo. Therefore, the only way to develop the East Side and turn it into a great place to live is to attack and eliminate these root problems. I want to stress that these root problems form social determinants of undesirable health and educational outcomes and a range of other socioeconomic problems, including violence and premature death. In the remaining time, I'm going to discuss the five critical root problems facing Black Buffalo. Substandard housing, disintegrating neighborhood infrastructure, lack of control over land and neighborhood development, structural joblessness and low income, and a new one, the planning and implementation of symbolic Fix the East Side projects. Substandard housing is one of the most critical root problems facing Black Buffalo. Rent gouging and underdeveloped and unhealthy homes are the characteristic features of this problem. Rent gouging refers to people paying 36% or more of their income on substandard housing, and it drives our housing insecurity on Buffalo's East Side. In a pioneering study, Princeton's Matthew Desmond and MIT's Nathan Wilmers found that property owners generated hyper profits from their rental properties in underdeveloped neighborhoods. They accomplished this feat by deferring maintenance and charging high rents. The profits came from the financial gap between the lower maintenance and the higher rents. This intertwining of low quality housing and high rents suggests that a similar process is occurring on Buffalo's East Side. Most East Side residents are paying 30% or more of their income on housing, with 36% paying 50% or more on rent. And in some East Side neighborhoods, people are paying a whopping 70% of their income on someplace to stay. So this rent gouging matters because when people spend a significant portion of their income on housing, they have much less money to purchase essential items, transportation, food, healthcare, medicine, and the like. So these high rents are the prime source of residential instability on the East Side. For example, Buffalo has the highest eviction rate in New York State, and the East Side leads the way. By the way, these figures come from City Hall. Yet they don't discuss it. But these are City Hall figures. In addition to evictions, an indeterminate number of Black workers, Black renters are moving constantly to avoid rent or to escape very bad living conditions. The constant movement of families is a source of neighborhood instability and a significant disruptor of Black life on Buffalo's East Side. There is an association between rent gouging and unhealthy homes on the East Side. As I said before, these predatory landlords make money by ignoring maintenance. Now, most studies of housing conditions in Buffalo use a windshield survey of external conditions to evaluate housing. While imperfect, this system still gives us considerable insight into the quality of East Side housing. In 2016, the city of Buffalo did a survey of 70,500 housing units. About 77% of these units range from average to distress. And on the East Side, residential structures range from moderately to severely distressed. Now, in low demand neighborhoods like those in the light purple and dark purple, 90% of the housing units were in some state of despair, decay, and decline. Our studies at the Center for Urban Studies confirm the city's assessment, and we conclude that most East Side Blacks now live in substandard, unhealthy homes that are often infested with rats, roaches, and other rodents. These housing conditions matter because they are associated with a wide range of health conditions, including toxic stress, sleep deprivation, respiratory infection, asthma, lead poison, infant mortality, and mental health. Luann Brown of the Perinatal Health Network shared this testimonial with me to concretize this interplay between high rents and unhealthy homes. One of her clients said, "My experiences on lead poisoning was not good because I was living in the chipping paint coming off the walls. I also had roaches and other bugs, not good at all. I hated living there. My kids were always sick. I had to throw away my food every day from the refrigerator because the roaches would get in. I wanted to move so bad. I was not able to move because I did not have enough money. The rents are too high." This mother was finally able to move to the town gardens, where rents were lower and the units were in better conditions. Unfortunately, this mother's story was a story shared by many other East Side mothers and other renters. I want to stress that these substandard housing conditions exist because the city of Buffalo does not enforce its existing housing codes, and it has never established a good housing standard beneath which no housing unit should be allowed to fall. The East Side sidewalk infrastructure. Those of you who know the East Side would probably suggest that I'm exaggerating. Not exaggerating. Many, if not most, of these sidewalks are in disrepair. Now, this situation matters because the East Side is a walking community. A significant number of people don't own cars, so they walk. And the sidewalk is the primary pathway for inter-neighborhood trips and journeys to and from the bus stop. Thus, these decrepit sidewalks create unnecessary hardships on the residents. For example, these sidewalks are difficult to use when pushing a stroller, or carrying groceries, or even just walking. And you certainly don't want to go jogging on them. Moreover, the sidewalks are dangerous for the elderly and impossible for the visually impaired to navigate. If you're visually impaired, you can't move on those sidewalks. And it's especially problematic because you don't have the federally mandated curve cuts. Can't use a wheelchair, scooter, or walker, or other mobility devices. So on the East Side, you'll see a lot of people in wheelchairs out in the middle of the street, going up and down those streets, all up in harm's way. And in the wintertime, with these long buffalo winters, those sidewalks are impassable and everybody's out in the street in harm's way. The lack of a green infrastructure is also a significant East Side problem. Major thoroughfares such as the Kensington Expressway, Sycamore, Broadway, Williams Best, East Ferry, Delavan, and Bailey Avenue bring an endless caravan of cars, polluting vehicles throughout the East Side on a daily basis. If you look at here, you see there are almost no trees all over there protecting the people from that pollution. And so the lack of this green infrastructure matters because it contributes to the heat island effect, water intrusion, the flooding of houses, and because high levels of air pollution are strongly associated with cardiovascular disease, adverse birth conditions, and contributes to asthma and other respiratory diseases. Now, I like to show this picture because it shows vividly the tree inequities in Buffalo. where you can literally see the profound difference between the tree canopy on the east side and on the west side of Buffalo. Finally, thousands of unkept vacant lots litter the east side, and they negatively affect the community's quality of life and social well-being. For example, many of these vacant lots contain trash and debris, or infested with rodents and overgrown with weeds. In many cases, these urban lots are filled with lead contaminants of the soil. And moreover, this interweaving of vacant lots, substandard houses, and owner-occupied housing drives the wealth and the value of the owner-occupied housing down. You can see from this particular map how those things are interwoven. And so the very way we build the east side create enormous barriers to wealth production because of the ownership of the homes are all integrated and interrelated with these other negative forms of land use. Perhaps the most significant barrier to east side development is that Black people do not own or control the land on which their community is developed. The location of Blacks on urban land means that neighborhood development and transformation, that's about real estate and real estate transactions. For example, the east side problem of unkept vacant lots stem from decisions that had been made from a series of Buffalo mayors from Frank Cedillo all the way to Byron Brown. And this decision to demolish thousands of housing units without simultaneously engaging residents in planning and developing neighborhood redevelopment strategies. Now, so that the problem was caused by the migration of thousands of workers, white workers, to the suburban homeownership zones. However, city leaders created a zero-sum game when they recklessly used mass demolition to solve this problem by creating another equally hazardous and unhealthy situation: unkept vacant lots. Consequently, on the east side, unlike other sections of Buffalo, thousands of unkept residential vacant lots dominate the landscape. Therefore, you cannot develop these neighborhoods without at the same time repurposing the vacant lots and reconnecting them to the neighborhood built environment. The city of Buffalo owns about 7,000 vacant lots, most of them on Buffalo's side. The problem is the city of Buffalo has no interest in using the ownership of these lots to spur neighborhood development. Instead, City Hall is becoming a land speculator that intends to sell these lots at or above market value. For example, the city of Buffalo sold to St. John's Church 4 vacant lots for $200,000. Zeller says that those lots are appraised at $16,000. And they've done this before, the developers have told you. Not far from that lot is another lot selling for $150,000. well above the assessed valuation. And to add insult to injury, that's more than most of the houses in the fruit belt are worth. City is a land speculator. Across the east side, speculators are selling strategically located vacant lots at inflated prices. This buying and selling is a form of what I call gentrification speculation and represent a significant barrier to east side development. So the commodification of vacant lots illustrate the challenge of Black community development on land that is owned and controlled by other people who have an agenda that has nothing to do with community development. A combination of systemic structural racism and the knowledge economy has locked most Blacks in the low-wage sector of the economy. The median household income for Blacks is only $30,000. And 66% of Black Buffalo earn less than $45,000 a year. So the knowledge economy, however, it didn't trap all Blacks in the low income sector. The sociologist William Julius Wilson let us know that the knowledge economy will always propel a handful of Blacks into the middle class while pulling the masses down into the low wage sector. So you have this phenomenon of a rising Black middle class and a falling Black masses stuck in the low wage sector of the economy. And in this sector, about 44% of the workers could only find part-time and seasonal work. Now understand this, to be in the labor market, you must be working or looking for work. If you're not working or looking for work, you're not in the labor market. So almost half the Black workers who are looking for work and trying to find jobs can only get part-time or seasonal work. Now, many of them are working 2, 3, or 4 jobs to earn a living, and euphemistically, mystifying, whatever the word is, call themselves gig workers. Gig workers mean you can't find one good job, so you take 2 or 3 poor ones. Systemic structural racism is also a factor. In Buffalo and Erie County, about 70% of all the jobs do not require a college degree. So there are significant working class jobs where you can earn a good living. The problem is that white workers are overrepresented in the high-end working class jobs, and Blacks are overrepresented in the low-end working class jobs. And educational attainment has nothing to do with this. Large numbers of Blacks finishing high school, a lot of them have some college but no degree. Racism is the only answer to that question. Barring you from union membership, not allowing you into apprentice programs, and all other kinds of activities to shield Blacks from competing with white workers. Now, since the release of the Harvey Run on September the 26th, 2022, a new and insidious issue has made our root problem this: the planning and implementation of symbolic East Side projects. City leaders launch these symbolic projects to inspire hope and possibility. The problem is that these initiatives will produce sound and fury, but not systemic and transformative change. Thus, in the end, they will signify nothing. For example, in recent months, New York State, in partnership with the city and the Buffalo Billions, allocated millions of dollars in projects targeting the East Side. These symbolic projects included initiatives to develop 5 East Side neighborhood anchors, stimulate the development of 4 East Side commercial corridors, Fillmore, Bailey, Jefferson, and Michigan, and provide funds to assist home ownership. The city leaders and their experts base these projects on the assumption that they will attract additional investment and catalyze East Side development. The problem is that these kinds of projects never catalyze anything. For example, the $1 billion school construction effort was supposed to spur neighborhood development around the rebuilt learning centers. It did not. The $7 million for the splash pad and casino was supposed to catalyze development around Martin Luther King Jr. Park. It did not. The Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus was supposed to spur development throughout the Fruit Belt. It did not. And now we're told that investing $98 million in the Buffalo Central Terminal and the Broadway market will suddenly magnificently transform this neighborhood where the people earn $17,000 a year, and you look at it on yourself. Some streets are only 2 or 3 houses. So I'm here to tell you, it will not catalyze anything. The point is that these symbolic projects are not denied. They create the illusion that something is going to happen when it is not. Moreover, they distract attention, talent, and resources away from solving the complicated root problems that hold back East Side social and economic development. The bottom line is that city leaders should move away from these symbolic projects and attack root problems. Not only this, but in the absence of a highly developed on-the-job training program, we can expect that the millions of dollars allocated for these symbolic projects will end up in the pockets of white owners and workers who will get the contracts to do the work. Within this market-centric pattern of development, Buffalo city leaders have wittingly or unwittingly turned East Side development into a big jobs program for whites. And those millions of dollars will flow through the Black community like water through a sieve, en route to white suburban communities and neighborhoods. Look at this picture. They're redoing the historic Michigan Avenue Baptist Church. That's a white worker working for a white masonry company in Orchard Park. Market-centric development. So, what is to be done? Several principles should guide this work. The first is a shared commitment to residents to control the community's land base and east side neighborhood development. Secondly, neighborhood development must tether this strategy of controlling land and neighborhood development to community, not individual, community wealth building, collective work and responsibility, a mixed economic approach, cooperative ownership, and participatory democracy. The third principle is to pursue a people-centric strategy based on equitable development, anti-gentrification, social and class inclusion, and social justice. The idea is to create a community that rejects class segregation and seeks to radically change what it means to be poor rather than abolish poverty. Understand what I'm saying? There is no magical law that says to be poor, you have to live in a rat-infested house. That's public policy. There's no law that says poverty means you can't be educated. That's public policy. So quit trying to abolish poverty and change the policies that make being poor a living hell. That's our objective in the development of the East Side. Let me briefly talk about a handful of projects that I think will make a difference. The first is that we got to divide the East Side into a series of planning districts. It's a big, complex project, geography. So you want to break it down into these smaller planning districts and then institute individualized projects within a neighborhood context. Within this framework, the first project focuses on gaining ownership and control of a significant portion of the East Side land base. This calls for the establishment of a publicly funded community land trust. The land trust will take residential and commercial land out of the volatile private real estate market, and it will make equitable district development possible by diffusing gentrification speculation and forging new strategies and models of community development. It will also facilitate the fight against substandard housing by providing a vehicle for acquiring houses placed in receivership by the housing court and developing programs to rehabilitate, construct, and manage housing units. The land trust will also seek to encourage the city to transfer ownership of all of its East Side vacant lots to the trust as a strategy for facilitating and bolstering neighborhood development. The substandard housing problem, characterized by rent gouging and unhealthy homes, is one of the top issues facing Black Buffalo. Renters dominate the East Side, and most of them live in substandard housing units. So we have to create a strategy that will focus on transforming and changing the houses that people are actually living in and reducing the rents. The current strategy focuses on new builds. You cannot build your way out of this issue. You have to improve the existing housing units where people are living. So a key part of that is to establish across the county a good housing standard in which no rental unit will be allowed to fall. And then develop a program of aggressive code enforcement combined with housing rehabilitation to ensure that all East Side housing is code. All of this will require developing a fund of dedicated resources to support housing rehab and the subsidizing of rents. The work to develop the green neighborhood green infrastructure has to lead to improved sidewalks, curbs,
and the repurposing and connecting of vacant lots to neighborhood built, to the neighborhood built environment. A number of activities along these lines could include infill housing, parks, and other low maintenance landscaping strategy. Moreover, the city should prioritize the development of a green infrastructure that would consist of an extensive network of tree planting, establishing rain gardens to catch stormwater, and the development of a network of shrubs and plants, especially in those neighborhoods that are adjacent to major thoroughfares. One of the most critical elements is the development of on-the-job training programs. And here the idea is to connect job training to Black business development and the East Side transformation. The redevelopment of the East Side will produce an economy of scale. And if we create the kind of on-the-job training program that allows people to maximally participate in these activities, we will create a situation in which people will be allowed to rebuild their neighborhoods as they rebuild their lives. And many of you know that inclusiveness of all of these residents in that process, that many folks have a lot of social issues involved with. And so you have to connect this with wraparound services, and then connect programs to provide them with skills like literacy, which is hugely important and significant. That has to be tied with the process of job training and development. If we do it this way, then the millions and millions of dollars that flow through the community will be captured by the community and reinvested in the community. I want to briefly talk about, indicate that the issues that I have been talking about are social determinants of many of the undesirable health outcomes facing Black Buffalo. We cannot abolish these health inequities without eliminating the neighborhood and socioeconomic conditions that breed them. So if you look at these figures, the kind of things that jump out of the premature death rate, almost twice that of fathers. And when we look at the infant mortality rates and low birth rate, folks, these are third world numbers. It's online with what's happening in Jamaica and these locations and places. Then when we look at the asthma and respiratory issues, it concretizes this problem of air pollution and the like. So Black Buffalo has not made meaningful progress over the past few decades. And if city leaders do not change their approach to city building and neighborhood development, Black Buffalo will not make significant progress over the next 30 years. Now alone, the government cannot solve the problems facing Black Buffalo, but it can facilitate East Side neighborhood transformation by attacking root problems and using its power and bullet pulpit to address Black Buffalo's greatest challenges and to focus the region's talents and resources on solving the most complex and urgent East Side problems. However, for this to happen, the city must abandon its flawed neighborhood development strategy. For example, the catalytic project idea will not work on the East Side. And expanded home ownership will not stabilize neighborhoods. Moreover, commercial corridor development does not drive neighborhood development. Neighborhood development drives commercial corridor development. And comprehensive neighborhood planning is a prerequisite to neighborhood development and transformation.
In closing, the problems facing Black Buffalo are complex. But what we have to do to attack them is not. We must confront the root problems facing Black Buffalo. The issues of substandard housing, disintegration of the neighborhood infrastructure, structural joblessness and low incomes, and the lack of control over the east side are producing the social determinants that are creating havoc in all other aspects of life. Buffalo will not make significant progress until city leaders cast away their illusions and attack these root problems. It is as simple as that. Nothing complicated. In the meantime, an authentic movement to develop and transform the East Side is growing and gaining momentum. So I remain optimistic, and I believe that another more democratic and racially just Buffalo is possible. We have a right to the city. Thank you.
We're gonna give Dr. Taylor just another chance to have a drink of water. And that was quite amazing. We have a half an hour for questions. Is that good with you?
I'm down with that.
He's down with that. All right. I will deliver a mic to you. If you have a question, raise your hand. Oh, no, actually.
I've worked in healthcare for 45 years in Western New York. I understand the social determinants that you identify. In the short term, as you pointed out, both rebuilding the east side and also rehabbing the east side, what suggestions you have for improving the short run? And I mentioned in my question that the state spent billions of dollars on a district program, and there's a Congressman Ryan, you know about the 1115 fee waiver that is supposed to deal with these social determinant inequities. So I was just kind of curious if your research has gone that far.
I think there are a number of things that first, you understand, when we talk about social determinants, we're saying about 70%. We're saying that about 70% of these health outcomes are related to the conditions that we find inside of neighborhoods and communities. On the other side, we have to really attack the racism that exists within a commodified healthcare system. And so here in Buffalo, we're working on that on several different fronts. At one level, we have to change the way we produce doctors. We have to change that system completely. So we're working on the development of what we call an anti-racist curriculum at the Jacobs Medical School. A curriculum that will run through all of the 4 years of medical school that students have. And in order to do that, that means that we begin to change the way students think, and we also change the way that the professors who are teaching those classes change. We've also developed a class called Health in the Neighborhood, which is a very unique class that's team taught by a combination of community people and physicians. And much of the time is spent inside of the neighborhood and the community where people get a chance to sit and chat and talk. residents to get an opportunity to know and understand what the conditions of life inside of the community. At another level, we're in the process of trying to reimagine the delivery of healthcare and what that will look like, and especially decentralized systems of healthcare. How you change everything around that system, including the way you get greeted inside of individuals' offices. And so toward that effort in Buffalo, we created 3 institutions to drive that effort. The African American Health Disparities Task Force, that's led by George Nicholas and Rita Hubbard Robinson, Buffalo Health Equity Center, that Willie Underwood, Dr. Willie Underwood leads, and the UP Community Health Equity Research Institute, of which I'm a part of. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. The most important, we're trying to get people to understand that there's this dialectical relationship between the built environment and health outcomes. And to see that the battle to change conditions inside of the neighborhoods and the community are related to health outcomes. Right now, we're putting together a team that's going to be looking at this, trying to determine one-to-one relationships between substandard housing and undesirable health outcomes. Because if we can establish enough cases where we can indicate that the issues that you are having, a specific person is having, is directly related to the housing that they live in, then it begins to open the door for lawsuits where we're going after the city to say you have a responsibility for maintaining these and you're not. So that's at one particular level. So at all 3 levels, work has to be done on this healthcare front. I hope that gets to the question that you have.
And I thoroughly enjoyed you, totally. I'm gonna say it as simple as I can. I was Lovejoy District, now I'm in University District. We have tons of funds for rebuilding in the community. But when you get on the list or you call, the list lasts forever. Well, you know there's 300 people before. There's 500, you're gonna be 501, you sure you wanna go on the list? Lady, you're positive. Now, my Lovejoy, I'm on the Lovejoy list, right? I'm number 301 or 501. I can't remember. But now I'm University District and I'm number 301 on that list. But those funds are supposed to be being dispersed for the community to repair their homes. But we never get those funds. That list is still the same as it was a few years ago. So I'm still 301, someone else is still 201. And the number 1 is still number 1, and they're not changing. What do you, give me your comments on redistricting and that monopoly game that they're playing with that, please, and the funds.
All of that, I mean, that's a wonderful example of a symbolic project, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing, designed to instill hope and possibility while delivering nothing. And I was very critical of the governance program because it continues to add to that. It's like a lottery program. I mean, it sounds good. I think they're going to give $4.5 million to help 150 people become homeowners. Well, there are over 26,000 renters. What will that do? And so, and the way in which City Hall spends money makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, nothing makes sense. And so that's what happens when you're dealing with administrations that are involved with symbolism. You have programs that don't work. Let me give you an example. The city of Buffalo has gotten a big chunk of money to the sewer authority.
Yeah.
And they're putting, some of you may know about it, they're putting together a plan to fix the pipes in some 40,000 homes and the pipes that run from the street to the house as a way of reducing lead. So I've been meeting with the folks. I said, look,
why can't we use this opportunity to do a thorough internal analysis of housing conditions? You're gonna be in the house anyway.
Yes.
We can kill two bones with one stone. Oh, no, we can't do that. That's another department. And we get this over and over and over. Between 2006 and 2016, on the east side, the city of Buffalo spent $179 million. And we analyzed the spending patterns. I got spies in City Hall. The mayor hates me. He really does. Even though we're frat brothers and I give him a secret handshake. He won't give me a secret handshake anymore. I'm not giving you a secret handshake up to okay. I still love you, bro. But there's so we analyze the spending. No rhyme, no reason to it. It's like wasted money. Then we look at the demolition and it's enough to make you cry. They have spent millions of dollars on demolition. All that money went to white folks, the white people who owned the companies that tore the houses down, the white workers who were tearing the houses down, and the white workers who were coming in, loading them up on trucks and driving them away. And then you sit back and say, what if? They had black companies and black workers tearing down the houses in the black neighborhood. And they captured those millions of dollars in wages and salaries. They could have rebuilt the community as they tore it down. That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. And so right now, y'all don't trust me. Go out and start looking at the prices of these vacant lots around town. And it's shameful because they're so far above assessed valuation. And like right now, my team, we have an entire city block in the Fruit Belt facing Futures Academy. We built a park and a community garden, and we maintain it in partnership with Futures. We got that land before commodification, right? We could have never done that if we had to pay market rates. And right now, as I talk, the mayor of the city of Buffalo is telling Grassroots Garden, who's trying to turn all of these gardens into community land trusts, that they have to pay market rate for them. And then you want to tell me you have an interest in the redevelopment of Buffalo? So we got the part of the problem in your case, they don't have enough money for everybody. And rather than just have a lottery and say, this is a lottery, a handful of y'all will be lucky, they pretend that anybody can get it. And only a handful or maybe nobody else gets it, who knows?
Nobody.
You know, we had a project over on Fillmore Avenue and we got, I think $3 million from the congressman. And they grabbed that money and took us almost 5 years to get it out of City Hall. They were trying to use it for everything. So my point is that there are considerable resources already existing in these cities in order to make major impacts. But the money is not spent wisely. And like this, a growing numbers of studies now that make an association between gun violence and neighborhood conditions. And when we map homicides in Buffalo, they're always in the hardest and toughest neighborhoods and communities. And they've shown that if you clean up and develop those neighborhoods, that you'll see a drop in the violence that occurs. I mean, it's hard not to be violent in some of those other neighborhoods, if the truth be told. So why aren't we fixing up neighborhoods rather than being one of the handful of cities in the United States that's increased its police budget? And meantime, according to Jim Haney and the investigative report, for any of you who've seen the studies, The city has $22 million of fines that they have not collected from slumlords. Now, I don't even understand that. Anybody in this room try not paying a parking ticket? You try not paying, the city is owned. I don't know where they find you, snatch you out of bed, you didn't pay your parking ticket. You're going to jail for 30 days. Or we're gonna put a boot on your car. We'll put a boot on you if you don't pay it. And then you got these folks out there with renting houses with roaches in it, etc. And then one thing I've never been able to figure out, and it's about values. If in Buffalo, I don't know about Ithaca, but in Buffalo, you try to drive your car without a sticker, they will snatch you down. And if you repeat, they'll send you to jail. But you can rent a house full of legs that's killing people. And we won't even get a slap on them. What's up with that?
We have a question online, and then I see the pink in the front, yellow in the back, and blue in the middle.
Two quick related questions. The first is around those lots. There used to be a program where you can get lots for $1. I own a lot in a community lot, and we're trying to get adjacent ones, and we're getting lots of pushback. Could you speak to how it went from a program for $1 to something like market rate? And then the other question is related to, a lot of these are actions by government entities. Are there any recommendations that you have for individual citizens?
Well, differently.
In terms of the first question, as the real estate market began to heat up, and as the gentrification began to increase in the city of Buffalo, Mayor Brown came to the belief that he could generate additional revenue for the city by selling these vacant lots at inflated prices. And as the demand from these lots began to emerge from the gentrification speculators, he took advantage of that by becoming a land speculator himself in City Hall. And they got into that particular business, especially since they own so many land and housing. So in some instances, like when we got the land over in the Fruit Belt, all you needed was a plan. You didn't even need money. And they leased us this land indefinitely. But all of that changed under the new administration. What was that second question?
What can an average
Oh, yeah.
citizen do?
A lot of these things ultimately require some help and assistance from government. So we have to work at two fronts. On the one hand, there are a lot of initiatives that we can launch down on the ground. And I don't want to get into any detail in that, but there are lots of things in the city of Buffalo where people are moving ahead in relationship to that. Then, but at the same time, we have to have an electoral strategy. We almost got the mayor out of here, but I think our position has to be, we're going to put people into office that have a people's agenda. When I say we have a right to the city, I'm saying this city doesn't belong to the politicians and the big bankers. It belongs to ordinary people. We have a right to the city.
Yes.
We have a right to build this kind of city that reflect our values, our hopes, and our aspiration. And in this next wave, we will elect people to council. We will elect the next mayor or folks who believe in the building of the type of city that we build. And I just want to say for all of the naysayers, if you look around the world, and I think that you should, the nations with the highest standards of living are all social democratic nations.
Yes.
All social democratic nations. And in the United States, if you look at the data on human development, we're down at the bottom of developed nations in literally every category, including life expectancy.
So my point is that we have the power and the capacity to build a prosperous Buffalo, but it will look differently than the Buffalo that is being built by the mayor and his other faces in high places.
Thank you. This has been wonderful. Just went back to what we were talking about a little while ago. What is your theory, if you don't know? You made it sound like you didn't know why City Hall and elected officials are ignoring the, taking legal action against slumlords. And I would think it would be a revenue stream to collect the however many millions you said in fines are outstanding.
The city government operates within an economic framework, kind of loosely called the words. And that's a framework that is low taxes, small government, and where at the same time you have what I call hyper individualism. So within that context, they create a lot of fake programs, and I call them loosely symbolic types of programs. And then they find themselves favoring powerful lobbies. And the real estate lobby is a huge lobby. And because we've created this system that is a failed system of placing housing within the province of the private sector. And when I say it's a failed process, nowhere at any time in American history, any place that I know of, have the private sector ever had the capacity to solve the housing problem. And it's never done that. But the way the slumlords do, they say, if you mess with us, we'll get out of it altogether. And they hold cities hostages to this because they won't pursue other patterns of development. And this is why we get land trust. Because with community land trust, if it's properly put up, and if you have the right kind of personnel, you can begin to take these houses from these people and bring them into a land trust evaluation. But you have to have the capacity to rehab, you have to have the capacity to manage, but you also have to be able to develop funding streams to subsidize that. Because low income groups do not have the capacity to generate enough income that will pay for the maintenance of for a lot of the houses. But there are ways where you can do joint ventures and there are a number of other types of things. So it will take some creativity, in order to be able to do these things. But that's the theory. So it's market driven. And because it's market driven, as long as they stay within the market dynamics, they'll make deals to certain operations and groups, and they will pursue certain patterns of development. So that's why, if you look at the guiding principles, we step outside of the market domain. Because you can use mixed approaches to development. In some instances, you allow the market to do what the market does. And in other instances, you control the market by controlling the way in which you want to develop land and other resources. But you cannot rely on these market-based principles to drive everything that you do. You have to use a mixture. And the problem with the city is it just doesn't understand any of it. And even when they try to do the right thing, they mess up because they don't know how to do the right thing, because they don't know the theories that are able to guide the levels of development. I'm glad I don't work with the city.
Thank you. I just want to thank you for coming out and speak to us. My name is Mohammed. I'm currently partnered with the Buffalo Niagara Community Reinvestment Coalition for this summer. And one of the bigger projects that we're currently in the works of is we're drafting a CBA, a Community Benefits Agreement. which we're gonna soon propose to the Buffalo Bills organization. And what this will ensure is that this multi-billion-dollar sport corporation, it was going to give back to the Buffalo community, specifically the low to moderate income communities, neighborhoods of East Side. So what my question is, how do we ensure that this pool of money, these funds that we're gonna get, how do we prevent it from just flowing straight through the Black community and going to the white community, and instead keeping it with the Black community for whether it's infrastructure reasons or community enrichment programs? And not only in the near future, but also in like 10 to 15 years from now, because to see the change that we're talking about right now for Buffalo, it's really dependent on two things: consistency and also time. It's not a one and done kind of thing.
I think that the first thing with community benefit agreements that I'm completely in favor of. I think we need, number one, authentic community benefit agreements. And organizations need to involve lots of people if they're going to spearhead that, so that they're authentic community benefit agreements. The second aspect of that, if a community benefit agreement is not codified into law, it has to be a legal document, then it doesn't mean anything. And so the key with these community development agreements is that you have to create a situation like if the Buffalo Bills, where nothing happens unless that becomes a legally binding document. I mean, I work with some other people and we put together a real authentic and legitimate community benefit agreement for the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. And they said, this is a wonderful document, and then they did nothing. So you have to be able to do that. The second thing, I go back to the point that I made earlier. We have to develop on-the-job training program. Now, Northland is what I call a symbolic project. Number one, and I won't even get into that, they designed and set it up wrong to start with. So you have to take a test before you can get trained. And if you don't pass the test, you got to do a lot of makeup work until you pass the test before you do the training. And that's because they created this agreement with these junior colleges. Like, I think that's pretty dumb. But let's forget about that. And let's forget about job placement. Let's say that Northland does a magnificent job in training and a magnificent job in placing every person that it trains. It trains only 300 people a year. Of those 300, only about 150 are Black. And I'm going to suggest and make up that they will all live on the east side and stay there. You do the math. In 10 years, how many workers do you train? 1,500. In 30 years, how many do you train? A little over 4,000. So if you're magnificent and perfect, you're not going to do anything with it. And that's what I mean by how they use symbolism to trick and fool people and make them think something is happening when nothing is happening. With an on-the-job training program, you blend all of that stuff together. You know, these kind of programs are complicated. But if they had started them 20 years ago, we'd have a whole new reality. I mean, I had that conversation with Tony Mazziello years ago when I was saying you need to develop a training program. I said, if we put these kids to work and teach them a whole bunch of things now, by the time they get to be 25 or 26, they would be a different group of kids. And nobody did anything like that years, 26 years later. So we can't romanticize these things. And the secret is on the job training. We're going to spend this money in the community. Right now with these symbolic projects, they're talking about $275 million. In the white community, they're breaking open the champagne, celebrating. Because this is gonna be a big payday for a lot of them. You know, we'll get a renewed Central Park terminal. But that's it. We won't get the wages and the salaries of those things. So there's nothing. Develop the on-the-job training program, and we need to put our best minds to figuring out what that would look like and how that will operationalize. And that's what I keep saying. If we identify root problems, a lot of them are very complicated. But if we put resources on them and put our best minds to working on them, then we can figure out a solution.
And I know that we have quite a few folks in the queue. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our time, so we're only going to be able to take one more question tonight.
Hi. My name is Anastasia. I'm a rising sophomore at Cornell, and I'm from South Windsor, Connecticut. So working here, especially with the 514 massacre, kind of hit home a little bit because Connecticut had that St. George shooting back in 2014. So I guess my question, since we're kind of on the topic of money and what we can do to improve the East Side, is with my placement at Color Goes By 2, I've been doing a lot of hands-on work with food pop-ups, and I'm really over there right by the top floor like every single week, multiple times during the week. So my question really is, there's a lot of money coming into the East Side because of what's happened recently. Do you think that those events, like the government is finally going to open its eyes to investing and kind of helping the East Side aside from the symbolic things that you were talking about? Or is this going to just be another roadblock that the government is going to turn its back on? And stuff like that?
I wouldn't say turning its back on, because that implies that at one moment it had its face on. And so it never was supporting the East Side of the development. So they don't have to turn it back. The point that I'm emphasizing is that when you look at their strategy for development, it's false. It's just false. I mean, they've identified these symbolic projects, the terminal, the food shop over there. Yeah. The training center, Martin Luther King Park, and the African American Heritage. Then they've emphasized these development of these commercial corridors, and then they've identified home ownership. So, I mean, I'm all in favor of home ownership. There's nothing wrong with it. But if the vast majority of your people are renters, then you want to be able to do something in relationship to that. So, right now, I'm not expecting a lot to come from that. What I am expecting is some exciting work that we're doing on, in the world of food security. There's some people doing some wonderful things. I think the African Heritage Food Co-op is a great work. My friend here is doing some amazing things on that level. So there's some other strategies that we need to take advantage of. Neighborhood crowdsourcing is an untapped way that we can generate money and resources. So I think that the resource issue will take care of itself. Where we're trying to get now is all of the progressive forces on the same page, so that we can begin to come up with some general ideas about the stuff that we want to do. So, because if we can get the progressive forces, progressive thinkers, progressive people down on the ground, operating around a common agenda, we can begin to create and generate some synergies. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. But my big concern now is within. When I think about City Hall, my concern is the next elections. And for us to continue to groom progressive folks who are interested in politics. Like, I'm just a mild man of style. I'm not a politician, but we have brothers and sisters who are politicians, and we should groom them and get them ready for action. So that's the direction. This current city hall, it'll never happen. And I'm saying that I worked closely with Byron Brown for a long time. For any of you who know the C station on Fillmore, that was my research and work with Dr. I bailed him out of trouble once. And this was the last straw. I'm in City Hall, right, for a press conference where they're announcing a major poverty initiative. I wanted to see what they were going to come up with. So I'm sitting there waiting, cameras and others, and someone comes, Doc, the mayor wants to see you. And I come back there, and he said, Dr. Taylor, I'd like for you and Nate Hare and whatever the sister's name is, died, to lead my poverty initiative. So I said, y'all don't have that together in the press conference and press me. He said, I need your help, Doc. I said, okay. Okay, listen, man, I'll do that. And then the man had nobody, there was no budget. There was nobody in City Hall aligned. We didn't have power to do nothing. It was a joke. There was never a program. There was never an idea. And then I began to realize, you know, all of the things. I even donated to his campaign once. Yeah, once. One time he was running and I went out to South Buffalo just so he wouldn't feel lonely. Although he has lots of friends out there now, if you go by the elections. But I discovered there was no interest in the policies that would help Black people or brown people or poor people. That was not on the agenda. Read his acceptance speech when he first came to office. And read that speech and close your eyes, you would think you were hearing Jimmy Griffin. No different. And the only difference was when you read his speech, almost a third of it was devoted to law and order. So when you hear what he stands for, he's no different from all of the other mayors that have run Buffalo. I can tell you what they all about: waterfront development, downtown development, develop the Anchor Institute, and get high-income white folks to come to the city. Yes. And then law and order to make sure that the Black and brown people don't scare away people of race.
Yeah, we said it out loud. We didn't.
So that's the platform. But change is coming.
Amen.
And I'm telling you, everywhere I go, there's a new energy. There's a new hope. There's a new sense of possibility. And so this is an amazing time. And that's why I'm hugely optimistic and why I constantly say another Buffalo is possible.
Yes.
I'll use that with saying thank you again to Dr. Taylor. That was magnificent. And when you get your progressive group together, let us know where and when. We'll be all there. Bring all of these, yeah. Cornell undergraduates. Thanks everyone for coming. Lenora, do you want to say a few?
Yes, I just want to again thank everyone for coming, being a part of our speaker night, and Dr. Taylor, this was amazing. Really appreciate it. Just before everybody leaves, we do have some lemonade and cookies in our exhibit room, so on your way out, feel free to join, grab some of those. Thank you again. Thank you.